Hey everybody, welcome back to Young Engineers of Today. I hope you had a good weekend. And hey, is that Tate under a different name? Okay, just making sure. 8 out of 10. All right. Well, we'll shoot for 10 out of 10, Noah. All right, so we're going to pretty good. Pretty good is pretty good. Pretty good is not bad. Yeah, I figured. Next weekend will be a 10 out of 10, hopefully. Um, oh, cool. Glad to hear it, Andrew. Really? Huh. The more you learn. Doesn't that make it your second cousin? It's usually, I think, nothing wrong with that at all, Liam. Yeah, I think that's what it is. It's okay, so like second cousin would be your cousin's cousin, and then once removed would be like so like your cousin once removed would be like the cousin of your dad, or like the cousin of one of your parents, or the cousin of one of your children. So then like twice removed would be like the cousin of one of your grandchildren or one of your grandparents. And okay, hello, this is nice, go away. Um, and then like third cousin would be your cousin's cousin's cousin. No, not really. I just got sidetracked. Um, so like a second cousin twice removed would be your one of your grandparents or your grandchildren's cousin's cousin. It's interesting. Can anybody hear me? Raise your hand if you can hear me. Oh boy. Okay. 1 second until we get internet back and everybody can be in on the class. Okay, yeah, sorry about that. That was interesting. I just, for some reason, my wireless adapter decided to not pick up any networks. So that was unique. uh, lesson learned. I will keep the troubleshooting to days where I am not teaching classes, because I think that was a side effect of me trying to fix a network issue earlier in the day. Maybe, potentially. Drivers conflicting and all kinds of wonderful things. Anyway, welcome back. Sorry about that. I didn't exactly anticipate that happening. We're going to switch topics today. I do enjoy Arduino, and if given the opportunity, I would do Arduino from now until the end of the semester. But as it stands, I know that's not everybody's cup of tea. And beyond that, we've got a whole bunch of other stuff that we're looking to cover. Yeah, this is a bit of an abrupt change of topics, but this is kind of we're going to work on this until Thanksgiving, essentially, and in order to give ourselves as much time as possible, considering we just finished a lesson in Arduino, decided that we were going to continue, or we were going to move on to a new subject today. So apologies, I didn't really give you guys any warning beforehand on Wednesday. I didn't really anticipate that we were going to be, changing topics, but this is what we're going to get started on right now, actually. We're going to get started on bridge designing. Oh, really? Oh, maybe send me an email with like your operating system and stuff like that, and I can give you some help on getting it set up on your computer at least, Andrew, so that you can work on it if you ever, if the fancy ever strikes you. But at any rate, in an abrupt left turn from what we've been doing previously, we are going to work on bridge design. Believe it or not, that's actually what we're going to be spending our time doing over the next couple of lessons. We don't have many before Thanksgiving because obviously we're not really going to, not polybridge, although that one is fun. This is a more engineering-based bridge designer, but I do enjoy polybridge quite a bit. We're hoping to design bridges that don't actually like require cars to make jumps in order to get across. It's going to be the same one you worked with last year, Andrew, although there might be an updated version. And actually, looking at this, I just realized that I uninstalled it last week thinking that we weren't going to use it ever again. But oh well. Let's continue with bridge design. Yeah, basically. So it's important to note that there are a lot of fundamentals that go into bridge design, a lot of moving parts, a lot of different things to think about, a lot of math involved in it, but it's not as scary as I make it out to be. There are some very important points which must be considered when you're designing a bridge. One of the things you have to take into account are the forces that bridges undergo on a moment-to-moment basis. And these are all basically dependent upon well, a bunch of different things, but let's just talk about the forces first. These are all individual points on the bridge could experience different forces in any given, at any given moment. So it's not like the entire bridge is going to feel one particular force. It could be, the middle of the bridge is experiencing one force while the edge of the bridge is experiencing a different force, while, along the top, partway through, it's experiencing a third force, that kind of thing. But I just wanted to make that clear at first before we even got started on these. The first force that a bridge has to withstand is compression. Compression is when you get two opposite forces acting along the axis of a given material. So, you take if you take like a notebook and you start, yeah, it is a very nice thing. If you take a notebook, and we can imagine that this is our, or even better, let's say like a paper towel roll. Say a paper towel roll, just like with no paper towels on it, just a regular old empty paper towel roll. As well as everything, yeah, exactly. And then you've got your paper towel tube. You place your hands on either end of it, and you start pressing your hands together. That is compression. If we imagine the axis of the paper towel roll is the hole, the middle, the empty tube part, which you can go hoo through, that is compression at work. Bridges have to deal with stuff like that. They have to deal with compression on individual struts and throughout the entire bridge, just from everything, from wind, from cars, from temperature changes, stuff like that. They'll experience compression. They'll also experience tension. So same paper towel tube, pull on the edges instead of pressing them in. That would be what tension is. So you've got compression, you've got tension. A bridge can experience both of these in different parts of it. And finally, you've got shear. So you would take your paper towel tube, and with the top end, you would press it to the left, and with the bottom hand, you would press it to the right. Now, this is not exactly a good analogy because with a free-floating paper towel tube, like in this example, it would just kind of rotate and then probably fall out of your hands. but you might also imagine that like maybe it's being fixed in place uh, with some other paper towel tubes or something like that, or you have it taped to, I don't know, the right angle between your computer and your desk. Why? No idea. Just, go with it. Um, and then you could try and apply that force to it, the sideways force to it, and you would put it under some stress. You would put it under some strain, because obviously it's flexible, but it's not made to flex a whole lot. It's made to hold paper towels, which are generally pretty rigid once you've got enough of them on there. That force is the shear force, with an A, not two E's. Um, think of like shears, cutting shears, things like that. Um, shearing force is another pretty nasty one, because that can cause, whereas compression and tension can weaken metal and things like that. Shear force is actually very, very bad for metal. Um, it doesn't tend to be very strong along uh, the perpendicular, an axis perpendicular to the one that, it's its main axis. There's a forces lab. I forgot about that. Well, if I remember, they're not that fantastic. So these forces are always constantly being exerted on bridges in different parts, different forces on different parts. You might have compression uh, in the middle, and you might have tension at the ends, and you might have shear along the top, or the sides or something like that. It will always be experiencing some combination of these forces at all times, and a bridge has to be able to withstand those forces. Now, those forces can be caused by a few different things, but generally the one that you think of are loads. Loads cause forces, putting things on the bridge. Now, there are a few different kinds of loads, though. There's a dead load, which is how much the bridge weighs. Um, bridge certainly has to be able to hold itself up, otherwise you've not made a very good bridge, now have you? If the bridge falls apart because you've made it too heavy and, not structurally sound, then it can't handle a dead load. A live load, however, is people walking across the bridge, trucks, um, cars. I don't know, if you're pushing a box across, that would be a live load. It's anything that is being carried by the bridge at that particular point in time, more so on top of the actual bridge weight itself. So you've got dead weight or dead loads, and you've got live loads, and a bridge obviously has to be able to carry both of them, otherwise it's not going to do very well. You've got static loads, which are loads that don't move. Those tend to be a lot of the dead load, not all of it though, because bridges can move and things like that. You might have, I don't know, signs on the bridge. You might have traffic lights on the bridge. You might have things like toll booths and stuff like that on the bridge. Those will generally be static loads because they're not going to go anywhere. Toll booths don't tend to really move on their own, um, nor do signs, things like that. So those would generally be good examples of static loads. Parked car on a bridge, there you go, that's another one. So if there's a lot of traffic on the bridge, you'll probably have a lot of static loads. But then dynamic loads are obviously the opposite. Car motoring across a bridge, driving across a bridge, person walking across a bridge, person biking across a bridge, um, uh, wild bear running across a bridge. I don't know, whatever. Um, so it's also possible that a static load can become a dynamic load and vice versa. So, traffic jams would be a good example of that. You might have stop and go traffic where all the cars just are stopped on the bridge waiting to be able to go through, and then the traffic lets up and the cars start moving. So these cars which were once static loads become dynamic loads again, and then they, hit they they have to come to a stop because the car in front of them came to a stop, and so they become static loads again. So you can go back and forth between them. Now, again, that's not necessarily always going to be true. A car on an open, empty bridge probably generally isn't going to stop for no particular reason whatsoever. So it's going to stay a dynamic load the entire time. Like I said before, a toll booth, those don't really tend to move unless something's gone horribly wrong. So those are going to stay static loads the entire time, that sort of thing. Then we got thermal loads, which is a thing that people don't generally think of. Thermal is interesting because, I mean, how many of you have placed like a drink in the freezer or something like that, and then had the drink overflow or explode over the night? So no, I've done that accidentally. Nobody told me it was going to happen. Yeah, a couple of you guys. You've done that before. And the reason it does that is because, well, water, when it turns into ice, that ice expands. It actually takes up more volume than just liquid water. Yeah, thermal expansion. Pretty much everything is going to expand or contract as its temperature changes. Very few things are not beholden to this physical phenomenon. Yeah, you might even be able to call it a law. But I don't know about physics to necessarily be talking in those terms. So I'm just going to keep it vague and coquettish and not actually say it is. Anyway, bridges are no exception to this rule. Whatever materials they're made out of, as they heat up and they cool down, they're going to expand and contract. And that's just the individual parts of the bridge. The bridge itself will do it, but it will cause, if you imagine like a, imagine something made of toothpicks that's all just sort of kept together, like maybe like a model bridge made of toothpicks. Now imagine those toothpicks could change in size. They could grow to become like a quarter of an inch longer than they were originally. If they're all meant to fit together tightly, this is an extreme example, but if they're all meant to fit together tightly, and you've got something, I don't know, you've got some kind of box strut design, which is common for bridges. What happens when every single one of these struts, so this one right here, and this one right here, and all of the four are around the edge, when all of those each expand a quarter of an inch, well, they're all going to start fighting for space. And unless something gives way, they're just going to experience ever-increasing force on each of those struts. These might be experiencing compression forces in the middle. The one on the bottom might be experiencing a compression force. The ones on the bottom and the top might be experiencing compression force as well, and the ones on the side might be experiencing shear forces in addition to compression forces. So, like, not fantastic. Everything's going to be experiencing its own set of forces, and everything's going to be strained, and, again, extreme example, but bridges do experience this to a lesser degree. As the individual parts of the bridge, the struts and the reinforcements and things like that, expand or contract because of temperature, they're going to be exerting force on the other parts of the bridge. And so that's just something that you have to take into account if you're designing a bridge. There's a lot of work that goes into designing a bridge. There's a very obvious one, earthquake. Earthquake is a load. If the earth shakes, it causes stress on the bridge. It exerts forces on the bridge. Pretty straightforward, right? I mean, shake a house of cards and it's going to fall over because it's experiencing forces, different kinds of forces, because the cards aren't necessarily bolted together. But, a bridge will experience force from an earthquake as well. Wind, Wind is a huge thing for bridges. It's a huge problem for bridges, and there's actually a couple of examples in history of wind being a much larger problem for bridges than people ever anticipated because of interesting sort of physics quirks, which we'll get into. I call it an interesting sort of physics quirk. It was actually kind of a terrible thing, but you'll see what I mean later. But yeah, wind is definitely a very prominent force that bridges have to deal with. Load, prominent load. Wind is not a force, it's a load. Now, we've talked, yeah, no, it's not very good at all. I agree, Andrew. Um, we've talked about all the things that a bridge has to deal with. So like loads and forces and things like that. It can give you a bit of an idea of what you might want to build it out of, because those are things you have to think about as well. Bridges can obviously be made out of different materials, just like literally anything else ever that we build, just about. And there are better choices than others, but it's not always so cut and dry. Sometimes in given situations, one material will be better than another material. But you might want to, on the whole, use a different material for the bridges that you construct. And then in these situations, you might want to use this material, that sort of thing. So, you know, it's always good to take a look at what kind of materials you can build a bridge out of and why they might be a good idea or not so good idea. So, wood, that's definitely something you can build a bridge out of. A lot of bridges are built out of wood. It's a pretty common building material for bridges. And that's generally just because it's cheap. It's cheap and it handles both tension and compression. Remember, pressing the paper towel roll and pulling the paper towel roll tube. So it handles both tension and compression decently well. On the other hand, it's something that has to be maintained pretty much constantly. Wood rots. Wood, if you're in a particularly wet area, if the wood is not treated, it can absorb water and become weaker. You have to make sure that the area is kept free of dry brush and stuff like that, because if that catches fire, your bridge catches fire, which makes it less than ideal. You know, it doesn't handle temperature changes generally terribly well, and it tends to be, all things considered, fragile. Now, that's not to say you should never walk across a wooden bridge. Wooden bridge tends to do a pretty good job at being a bridge. Well enough that a lot of footbridges and things like that are made out of wood, especially in areas where they, you know, they want to have like an aesthetically pleasing sort of thing. Wood can also be better at absorbing temperature changes. You know, it might experience more physical forces, but at the same time, it's not necessarily going to get as warm. So it can be more pleasant to walk across a wooden bridge on a hot day than a metal bridge, especially if like you're barefoot or something like that. You know, if you're thinking like a bridge at the beach or something like that. But all in all, you know, whereas wood can be cheap and easy to replace parts on it and things like that, it's something you'll have to do fairly often, and comparatively speaking, compared to other materials, wood doesn't really stand the test of time as well. It also doesn't do terribly well with shear forces either. Next, you got concrete. Well, concrete's super cheap. That's nice. Concrete handles compression like a champ. Like, it just doesn't care about compression. Things are just trying to compress it, and it's like, nope, Everything's fine. Concrete is also fireproof and weatherproof. Certainly weatherproof, at least for the most part. Uh, Obviously, there's some maintenance that needs to be done on concrete in order to keep it in tip-top shape, but it's not going to just completely disintegrate as soon as there's a large storm. In addition, concrete is, yes, generally fireproof. There are materials on concrete which can catch fire. So, if you have like a traffic bridge that's poorly maintained, it has a bunch of oil absorbed into it or something like that. Not exactly the best, but oh yeah, see, there you go. Jacob knows better than I do. But yeah, it does these things very well. It's not really that worried about fire. You can compress it. It doesn't care. It's easy to build. It's a very, solid material in that sense. On the other hand, it doesn't really handle tension well. It just cracks, which feels like an analogy for people. But anyway, it does not handle tension well, and it is impacted by thermal load. So again, as because water can seep into uh, porous surfaces on concrete and things like that, and then as things freeze, water turns into ice, cracks the concrete from underneath, and that's where you get stuff like potholes. Because then cars drive over it and soften it up more, and the inside of it is deteriorated and like underneath the surface of the concrete, and so it crumbles and bad time all around. So it can be impacted by thermal load. Now this is not fire. This is just change in temperature. So, nice. That's pretty intense. That is super intense. Concrete might not be enough, but what about reinforced concrete? What if you just stuck some metal bars inside the concrete as you were making it to help provide more structure and stability? Well, the nice thing is, exactly. The nice thing is, it's still pretty cheap because you don't tend to use very expensive metal in order to, create a structure for the concrete. It handles compression and tension both pretty well because the metal handles tension pretty okay, and so it provides structure to the concrete so it doesn't just fall apart. The concrete is, like I said, completely amazing at handling compression, so it's got that. Like they sort of work together, tag team, in order to be able to handle compression and tension. And again, it's fireproof for pretty obvious reasons, and it's weatherproof. Um, Again, because of the fact that concrete does tend to do pretty well against the weather. But those dang thermal loads again. Still can't really handle them well, but just because of the way that physics works, essentially. Now we're entering into the metal bridges. Metal. This is where, you know, things start getting a little bit more expensive. Just a little bit, or a lot. But anyway, cast iron. Cast iron is literally you just dump iron into a cast that is in the shape of the thing that you want, and then you let the iron cool and you get it out, and now you've got iron in the shape of the thing that you want. Um, the nice thing is it forms in any shape. You just got to create the cast in the shape of what you want. It handles compression well because it's all one piece. Well, I mean, there are fewer welds and stuff like that, so you don't have to worry about the welds failing as much as you would with uh, metal that's much more segmented, since welds can sometimes be the weak points in a bridge depending upon, how it's constructed. And it's fireproof because metal doesn't really catch fire that easily. It just more kind of melts. And if you're at a point where everything's hot enough for your bridge to melt, there are far bigger problems than the bridge melting. Like far bigger problems. Now it's got some cons. It is expensive. You know, it's no wood, it's no concrete. It does require a fair amount of resources in order to be able to construct. It does not handle tension well. Yeah, it'd be pretty terrifying. It would be, yeah. Does not handle tension well, so, you know, because again, it's not a very malleable material. So, you know, pulling on it, not going to do very well. And then probably the most terrifying one, breaks without warning. It just breaks. You just, let me walk across the bridge. Well, walking across the bridge seems like a pretty sturdy, good bridge. Bam, everything falls apart. I mean, we're talking about pretty extreme scenarios in which the bridge has not been maintained and it's under pretty extreme circumstances. Uh, but, you know, it's still a terrifying thought. And we got steel. Now we're getting into the modern age. Steel is nice. Bros, it forms in any shape. Just like cast iron, again, because we can mold it to our needs or manufacture it to our needs. It's good with compression. It's good with tension. It's fireproof. It's weatherproof. It's steel. It's just malleable enough, not have to worry about being brittle unless it's super cold. And it's just super duper strong. Alloys, man. Alloys are the way of the future. But it's super expensive. Like that bridge is expensive right there in the picture. That's a really expensive bridge. Really expensive bridge. Super expensive. But, you know, if you want to ensure this big giant bridge you're building is going to last for a long time, yeah, steel's not a bad idea. Steel's definitely not a bad idea. So with that in mind, now that we've thought about the forces and the loads that a bridge has gone under and discussed the materials, you might be able to get just like I'm not saying like we're bridge experts now, but maybe like you can think like, oh, small footbridge, a place that gets a lot of foot traffic, and the weather stays pretty consistent year round. Maybe go with concrete or some kind of reinforced concrete. Or maybe it's, you know, just a small bridge in your own personal property that you're going to use every once in a while. And you're in an area that, like, I don't know, rains a fair amount, snows too. Maybe it would. Maybe it would. How expensive do you think it costs? Oh, I'm sure those bridges are on the order of hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars. I'd probably put more money down on millions of dollars, though. I'm talking about something like this. This has got to be millions of dollars. But then you got a big, expensive, pretty bridge. But anyway, yes, spending some time thinking about like what exactly you might want to construct a bridge out of based on the circumstances. You might have at least a vague idea of what you would like. Now, bridge shapes. Those are also an important thing to take into consideration because the material that you build the bridge out of will have a hand in determining how durable the bridge is. But the bridge shape will actually also play a very large part. For instance, rectangle bridges, just flat bridges with two supports on either side, or a support on either side, depending upon how you want to interpret that. Not very stable. Not very great. Doesn't do the trick very well. In fact, this is a wooden bridge that's rectangular. It's probably not that amazing. But it's good enough, you know. It'll do the trick for light loads. And you've got arch bridges. Arch bridges are very good for compression because they distribute the compression all along the arch as opposed to just being in one particular spot. So they're very, very good for that. This, I don't know, maybe. I do not know. But yes, this is very good for compression because again, it can handle that very well. And then you want to strengthen it with a buttress. Oh, really? That's pretty awesome. Never been. I want to go. And a buttress is just a support, essentially. It's a type of support. Oh, nice. Congratulations. We got triangle bridges. Triangle bridges work well with both compression and tension, again, because they can distribute that force along the other points of the triangle, along the other sides, along the other triangles, really. And then, that will pass some of the force along to the next triangle and so on and so forth. So it does a very good job at distributing the force along the entire bridge, which makes the entire bridge last longer as a result, because it's not so much about the amount of force that a bridge is experiencing. It's about how much force a point on the bridge is experiencing at any given point. So if you're able to distribute that force among other parts of the bridge, your bridge has a better chance of standing, even if it's taking more force total than like a rectangle bridge might be or something like that. Or if you took all of the points on the bridge that are experiencing force and added them together, if a bridge can distribute its force efficiently, it will be able to withstand higher overall force than a bridge that cannot. And of course, it's strongest at the points. Now we gotten all that out of the way. All of that. Let's, excuse me, late night at work last night. Let's talk a little bit about the history of bridges. Oh boy, I know, it's super exciting. But Rome was the first society to build great bridges. There have been societies which have existed in the past before Rome, which have built bridges. That's not a thing unique to Rome. However, Rome's bridges were pretty serious. Like in this picture here, for example, that's a big bridge. That's a real big bridge. In fact, yeah, I'm pretty sure that's a bridge. Anyway, super big. That's what they're pretty good at. They're pretty good at their engineering feats, and they're taking stuff over, at least for a while. What is the point of the second layer? Why not just use the first layer? Quite honestly, a lot of it probably has to do with aesthetics. There might be some distribution of force along the additional layers. Some, not a lot, but some. But by and large, I think a big part of that bridge design is just simply pure aesthetics. Yeah, maybe. Yeah, exactly. The odds are probably not, but potentially. So Rome developed and improved the arch bridge. That, I'm pretty sure that's supposed to be arch, not ach. The arch bridge. The arch bridge is better than a post and beam bridge for river traffic. Why might that be? The ach bridge. Willkommen alles. Not die Ach-Berge. I don't know. It's been a while since I've used German. Well, anyway, an arch bridge is good because it allows the river to go underneath and allows like boats on the river to go underneath. I mean, nobody's really surprised by that. But yeah, that's what's good at. You can do that. Does the thing. It's great. Everybody loves it. Still used it today. So, you know, it's got to be a good sign. It's a design that stands the test of time. Then nothing happened for a long, 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 long time. Romans built stuff and they were like, oh, hey, it's cool. We really can't improve upon that until iron came along. And everybody was like, whoa, we can do all kinds of stuff with iron. We could build like really big arches with iron. And they were like, yeah, you're right. You can. You can build really big arches with iron. And everybody did that. And, you know, metal became the new hot thing for building bridges. This looks very European, this bridge right here. Metal envy. Yeah, this is a super European looking picture. Kind of wonder where that is. What if they decided to make one out of gold? That would be a bad idea. Gold is very pliable and malleable, and it would just kind of probably sag after a while, and then it would fall apart. It would look cool. Yeah. It would look very fancy. So iron actually had a large hand for walking only. Had a large hand in and for like 5 foot spans. You know, iron had a large hand in the suspension bridge. The suspension bridge is actually a very popular type of bridge nowadays for large spans, like this picture here, because it is very effective at redistributing tension and compression along the middle bits to the buttresses on either side. So it's very useful for that. And iron is one of the few things that's strong enough that can be used for a suspension bridge. Obviously, you know, nowadays cat almost fell off the top of my bookshelf. Iron can be used for many things. So, or many things can be used for a suspension bridge, excuse me. But at the time, since iron was the new thing, that's what it was used for. Brooklyn Bridge was one of the first modern suspension bridges built across a great expanse. That expanse being, you know, the Hudson. And it's actually, you know, a fairly well-known modern engineering marvel or project, depending upon your preferred interpretation. But yeah, the Brooklyn Bridge is pretty famous for that. London Bridge did, but I don't think Brooklyn Bridge has actually collapsed at any point. I think it's actually done okay. It's in a relatively bridge-friendly area. I mean, there are pretty extreme temperature changes, but those happen over the course of months. If there aren't any earthquakes or high winds they really have to worry about that are too bad, I think for the most part they do okay. Of course, if you want to talk about famous suspension bridges, you have to go to my home state of California, the Golden Gate Bridge, which it's not actually gold. But I feel like there was a thing about that. Yeah, I imagine that the copper is probably in the design has probably oxidized a little bit. It might have been a different color. It may also have something to do with the fact that it's related to the Golden State, as California is known as the Golden State. So it might have been the gate to the Golden State, even though it's it goes from one place in California to another. So I don't know. Yeah. Inherent flexibility in suspension bridges sometimes creates problems. Create problem. Sometimes creates problems, as in the Tacoma Narrow Suspension Bridge. So this is the thing I was talking about. This is where wind can actually cause a huge problem. It's important to note that this particular bridge was very, 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 very large. Yes. Like, you know, you might have a, well, I say very, 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 but like, for instance, for reference, a car might be that big on it. You know, it was meant to be like one lane road either way. That should give you some idea of how dramatic that flexibility is in that bridge. Now, this was caused because of high winds, and the winds actually, this can be a problem with bridges where they hit a certain resonance point and just sort of feed in upon themselves and make the shaking or whatever actually much, much worse than it would be even with like higher speed winds, because it's actually just hitting that perfect that perfect speed. Like you ever seen the whole thing where like an opera singer hits a note and then a glass breaks? Um, that's because there are inherent frequencies, or I say inherent frequencies. There are frequencies which will affect objects more than other frequencies, even frequencies above or below it. There's just that sweet spot that causes the structural integrity of that object to weaken. Get to a certain point, you can cause it to break. Flexibility can sometimes allow that frequency to express itself to a catastrophic level, to the point where the bridge breaks. The Tacoma Narrow Suspension Bridge is an example of that happening. The bridge was flexible enough, the wind was hitting at the right frequency, and the bridge snapped. Yeah, we covered a lot of different stuff today. Just like we sort of run through everything bridge related. That's because we're going to get started on Bridge Designer on Wednesday. So let me go ahead and get the link for the Bridge Designer into yeah, understandable, Andrew. Into the chat. Bam. Just go ahead and follow that link. In mind, yeah, people might. Oh, I get you. That's fair. I mean, sometimes it's going to happen though. Sometimes it's just going to be a lecture day. Yeah, if you already downloaded last year, good to go then. I've got this privacy error thing from Google. I'll just click advanced and then proceed to bridgecontest.org. If you already have it, cool, don't worry about it. And then just go ahead and download for your operating system. Just so we are all set to go for Wednesday and we can actually get started on it. At any rate, it is, I gotta do the poll questions and then I gotta bounce out for the high school class. I just wanted to make sure we covered as much as we could. It's in the chat box. As much as we could before we got started, like so we could get started right on the bridge design software on Wednesday. So here we go. First poll question incoming.